At exactly 3:17 a.m. on a cold November morning in 1923, something impossible happened in a small boarding house room in Prague. 17-year-old Helena Moravek had been struggling with her philosophy studies at Charles University for months, her mind clouded with doubt about her chosen path. As she drifted into sleep that night, clutching her grandmother's worn leather journal against her chest, she whispered a desperate plea into the darkness. What happened next would not only transform her understanding of learning and wisdom, but would eventually lead to a revolutionary method of soul communication that thousands would later follow. This wasn't just Helena's discovery. It speaks to an ancient human capacity for inner dialogue that exists within each of us, waiting to be awakened through the sacred gateway of sleep. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Helena's journey began not with supernatural phenomena, but with profound frustration. Born to a family of Prague booksellers, she had always felt drawn to questions that seemed to have no earthly answers. While her classmates focused on memorizing philosophical arguments, Helena found herself lying awake at night, wondering not what the great thinkers had said, but what her own soul truly believed. Her grandmother, Helena Moravek, had been a woman of unusual wisdom who spoke often of the night conversations she claimed to have with what she called her deeper self. Anna had passed away the previous spring, leaving Helena her personal journal filled with cryptic notes about dreams, inner guidance, and what she referred to as, quote, soul whispers. The night of November 16th had been particularly difficult. Helena had failed another examination in metaphysics, and her professor had suggested she might be better suited for more practical studies. Feeling lost and disconnected from her purpose, she returned to her small room overlooking the Vltava River. The journal lay open on her wooden desk, its pages filled with her grandmother's elegant handwriting. One entry, dated 15 years earlier, caught her attention in a way it never had before. Anna had written about a technique she discovered for accessing what she called the wisdom that sleeps within us all. According to her grandmother's notes, this wasn't about receiving messages from external spirits or divine beings, but about establishing conscious communication with the deepest aspects of one's own soul. Anna described it as learning to ask questions of the part of ourselves that exists beyond our daily worries and surface thoughts. The method seemed deceptively simple, yet Anna had written about it with such reverence that Helena felt compelled to try it that very night. The technique, as Anna described it, involved three essential elements. First, the preparation of both mind and environment for what she called sacred dialogue. This meant creating a space of complete stillness, free from the distractions that typically filled the mind during waking hours. Second, the formulation of a genuine question, one that arose not from curiosity but from a sincere desire for guidance or understanding. Third, and most importantly, the cultivation of what Anna termed receptive surrender, a state of patient openness that allowed insights to emerge naturally rather than forcing them through mental effort. That night, Helena followed her grandmother's instructions with meticulous care. She cleared her small room of all unnecessary objects, leaving only the journal, a single candle, and a glass of water on her bedside table. She bathed in cold water, as Anna had suggested, to heighten her sensitivity to subtle impressions. Then she sat quietly for several minutes, allowing the concerns and mental chatter of the day to gradually settle. When she felt truly calm, she formulated her question with careful precision. Rather than asking whether she should continue her studies or what career she should pursue, she asked something deeper and more essential. She wanted to understand her soul's true purpose, the reason her spirit had chosen this particular life and circumstances. Following Anna's instructions, Helena wrote her question on a clean page of the journal, then placed it beneath her pillow. She lay down and began the breathing technique her grandmother had described, a slow, rhythmic pattern that seemed to draw her consciousness inward. As she continued breathing in this deliberate way, Helena felt her awareness shifting into a state unlike ordinary sleep or waking consciousness. She remained aware of her surroundings, yet felt herself sinking into deeper layers of inner space. What happened next defied Helena's expectations entirely. Rather than receiving a voice or vision, she experienced what could only be described as a profound knowing that seemed to arise from within her own being. The understanding came not in words but in a form of direct comprehension that bypassed her usual thinking processes. She saw, with startling clarity, that her soul had indeed chosen this life of questioning and seeking, not to find easy answers, but to help others discover their own capacity for inner wisdom. The message wasn't about changing her studies or her path, but about approaching them from an entirely different perspective. When Helena awakened the next morning, she found that something fundamental had shifted in her consciousness. The philosophical concepts that had seemed so abstract and meaningless now appeared rich with personal relevance. More importantly, she had gained confidence in her ability to access deeper guidance whenever she truly needed it. The technique had worked not by providing external information, but by awakening her connection to her own inner knowing. Over the following months, Helena continued practicing her grandmother's method, refining the process through careful experimentation. She discovered that the quality of her questions greatly influenced the depth of guidance she received. Shallow concerns about grades or social acceptance rarely yielded meaningful insights, while genuine inquiries about her purpose, her relationships, and her spiritual development consistently opened doorways to profound understanding. She also learned that the state of consciousness required for soul communication was quite specific. It wasn't ordinary sleep, where awareness dissolved completely, nor was it normal waking consciousness, where the analytical mind dominated all experience. Instead, it was a twilight state of relaxed awareness that allowed deeper wisdom to surface, while maintaining enough consciousness to receive and remember the insights that emerged. Word of Helena's unusual abilities began to spread quietly through the university. Fellow students noticed her transformed approach to learning and the uncanny wisdom she seemed to access when discussing complex philosophical questions. A few close friends asked her to share what she had discovered, and Helena found herself reluctant at first to reveal something so personal and sacred. However, she remembered her grandmother's conviction that such gifts were meant to be shared responsibly with those who were ready to receive them. In the spring of 1924, Helena began meeting informally with a small group of students who were genuinely interested in developing their own capacity for inner dialogue. She emphasized from the beginning that what she was sharing wasn't a supernatural power that only certain people possessed, but rather a natural human ability that could be cultivated through patience, sincerity, and proper practice. She insisted that the goal wasn't to become dependent on inner guidance for every minor decision, but to develop a conscious relationship with the deeper wisdom that exists within everyone. The practice sessions Helena conducted followed a careful structure that she had developed through months of experimentation. The group would meet in a quiet room overlooking the university gardens, always in the evening when the day's activities had settled into. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Stillness. Each participant was encouraged to bring a single, carefully formulated question that arose from genuine need for guidance or understanding. Helena had learned that questions driven by idle curiosity or attempts to glimpse the future rarely produced meaningful results. The preparation process began with what Helena called conscious cleansing, not just of the physical space but of the mental and emotional atmosphere as well. Participants would spend time in silent reflection, releasing the tensions and preoccupations of the day. Helena taught specific breathing techniques that her grandmother had described in her journal, patterns that seemed to naturally induce the receptive state necessary for soul communication. One of the most important discoveries Helena made during this period involved the role of genuine desire in accessing inner wisdom. She found that the technique worked most effectively when approached with what she termed sacred intention, a quality of sincere seeking that went beyond mere intellectual curiosity. Those who came to the practice sessions hoping for dramatic psychic experiences or seeking easy answers to complex life problems rarely achieved meaningful results. However, individuals who approached the work with humility, patience, and genuine desire for spiritual growth consistently reported profound insights and guidance. The actual communication process, as Helena refined it, involved entering the specific twilight state of consciousness while holding one's question in gentle awareness. Rather than demanding immediate answers or expecting voices and visions, practitioners learned to cultivate a quality of patient receptivity that allowed insights to emerge in their own time and form. Some received guidance through sudden understanding or intuitive knowing. Others experienced symbolic imagery that required careful interpretation. Still others found that their questions were answered through subsequent dreams or through meaningful synchronicities that occurred in the days following their practice. Helena emphasized repeatedly that the wisdom accessed through this practice wasn't foreign knowledge coming from external sources, but rather the awakening of understanding that already existed within each person's own soul. She taught that every human being possessed an inner dimension of consciousness that maintained connection to universal wisdom and understanding. The challenge wasn't to acquire new information from outside oneself, but to remove the barriers that prevented access to this inner knowing. The theoretical framework Helena developed to explain these experiences drew heavily on her philosophical studies while remaining grounded in direct personal experience. She proposed that human consciousness existed on multiple levels simultaneously, with most people's awareness focused primarily on the surface layer of thoughts, emotions, and sensory experience. Beneath this ordinary consciousness, however, lay deeper levels of awareness that maintained connection to broader sources of wisdom and understanding. According to Helena's understanding, the soul represented the eternal aspect of human consciousness that transcended the limitations of personality and circumstance. This deeper self possessed access to knowledge and wisdom that wasn't available to the ordinary thinking mind, including understanding of one's life purpose, the lessons one had come to learn, and the most beneficial path forward in any given situation. The key to accessing this wisdom lay in learning to temporarily set aside the dominance of analytical thinking and create space for deeper knowing to emerge. The breathing techniques that proved most effective in Helena's practice were variations of what her grandmother had recorded in her journal. The fundamental pattern involved breathing in slowly and deeply while counting to 7, holding the breath for a count of 7, then exhaling completely while counting to 7 again. This rhythm seemed to naturally induce the relaxed, yet alert state of consciousness necessary for soul communication. Helena discovered that maintaining this breathing pattern for at least 20 minutes was usually required before the optimal state of receptivity developed. Environmental factors also played a crucial role in the effectiveness of the practice. Helena found that complete darkness or very dim lighting helped participants move more easily into the twilight state of consciousness. She recommended that the room temperature be slightly cool, as warmth tended to induce ordinary sleep rather than the alert receptivity required for inner dialogue. The presence of natural elements such as plants or stones seemed to enhance the quality of the experience, though Helena was careful to emphasize that such elements were supportive rather than essential. The timing of practice sessions proved to be another important variable in Helena's method. Her grandmother's journal had mentioned specific hours that seemed most conducive to soul communication, and Helena's own experimentation confirmed these observations. The period between 10 in the evening and 2 in the morning appeared to offer optimal conditions for inner dialogue, particularly the hours around midnight, when the boundary between day and night created a natural sense of transition and openness. As Helena's work became more widely known, she began receiving requests for guidance from people facing serious life challenges. A merchant who had lost his business in the economic turmoil following the war came seeking direction about rebuilding his livelihood. A young mother struggling with the death of her child asked for help in understanding the meaning of her loss. An elderly professor approaching retirement wanted to know how best to use his remaining years. In each case, Helena emphasized that she wasn't providing answers from her own knowledge or authority, but rather teaching people to access their own inner wisdom. She would guide them through the preparation process and help them formulate questions that were likely to yield meaningful guidance, but the actual communication occurred between each individual and their own soul. This approach protected both Helena and her students from the dangers of dependency and spiritual inflation that could arise when one person claimed to be the source of wisdom for others. The results of Helena's work continued to be remarkable throughout the 1920s. Students reported not only receiving specific guidance about immediate concerns, but also developing an ongoing relationship with their inner wisdom that transformed their approach to life decisions. Many described a growing sense of inner peace and confidence that came from knowing they could access reliable guidance whenever they truly needed it. Helena herself continued to deepen her own practice throughout this period, discovering new dimensions of soul communication that went beyond seeking guidance for personal concerns. She learned to use the twilight state of consciousness for what she called wisdom absorption, a process of opening herself to universal understanding about topics that interested her deeply. Through this approach, she reportedly gained insights into philosophical and spiritual questions that far exceeded what her formal education alone could have provided. The theoretical implications of Helena's discoveries extended well beyond the practical applications of her method. Her work suggested that human consciousness was far more vast and capable than most people realized, and that the boundaries between individual and universal awareness were less fixed than commonly assumed. She proposed that what people typically considered to be their complete identity, the personality with its thoughts and emotions, actually represented only a small fraction of their true being. This expanded understanding of human nature had profound implications for education, psychology, and spiritual development. If Helena's insights were correct, it meant that each person possessed inner resources for learning, creativity, and wisdom that remained largely untapped in conventional approaches to human development. Rather than relying primarily on external sources of information and guidance, individuals could learn to cultivate conscious relationship with their own deeper knowing. The ethical dimensions of Helena's work received considerable attention as her method became more widely known. She consistently emphasized that soul communication should never be used for selfish purposes or to gain advantage over others. The wisdom accessed through inner dialogue was meant to serve one's highest spiritual development and to enhance one's ability to contribute positively to the world. Any attempt to use the practice for personal gain at others' expense would, according to Helena's experience, result in the gradual loss of access to genuine inner guidance. Helena also stressed the importance of maintaining humility and discernment when working with inner guidance. She taught that not every impression or insight that arose during practice represented authentic soul communication. The analytical mind, personal desires, and emotional patterns could all influence the content that emerged during the twilight state of consciousness. Learning to distinguish between genuine guidance and these other influences required patience, experience, and honest self-examination. The practical applications of Helena's method extended into virtually every area of human experience. Students reported using soul communication to gain clarity about career decisions, relationship challenges, health concerns, creative projects, and spiritual development. The key in each case was approaching the practice with sincere desire for guidance that would serve one's highest good and the good of others, rather than seeking information that would merely satisfy personal curiosity or ambition. One of the most significant discoveries Helena made involved the cumulative effects of regular practice over time. While individual sessions of soul communication could provide valuable guidance for specific concerns, the ongoing practice of inner dialogue seemed to gradually transform practitioners' relationship with themselves and their lives. Many reported developing greater self-trust, enhanced intuitive abilities, and a deeper sense of connection to their purpose and meaning. Helena's method also appeared to have beneficial effects on physical and emotional health. Practitioners frequently described improvements in sleep quality, reduced anxiety, and greater overall sense of well-being. Helena theorized that establishing conscious communication with one's soul helped to align the personality with the deeper currents of life force and wisdom that promoted natural healing and balance. The scientific community of Helena's time showed little interest in investigating her claims, dismissing them as subjective experiences without objective validity. However, Helena remained confident that future research would eventually validate at least some aspects of what she had discovered. She believed that the expansion of human consciousness she had experienced represented a natural evolutionary development that would become increasingly common as humanity matured spiritually. By 1930, Helena had trained dozens of individuals in her method of soul communication, and several of these students had begun teaching others in their own communities. She was careful to maintain quality control over this expansion, insisting that anyone who taught her method must demonstrate consistent success in their own practice and maintain the ethical standards she had established. The work was never to be commercialized or used for personal aggrandizement, but rather shared freely with those who approached it with appropriate seriousness and respect. Helena's personal life during this period reflected the integration of her spiritual discoveries with practical engagement in the world. She completed her philosophical studies and went on to teach at several European universities, always incorporating the insights she had gained through soul communication into her academic work. Her approach to philosophy emphasized direct experience and inner knowing as essential complements to intellectual analysis and scholarly research. The lasting impact of Helena's discoveries extended far beyond the specific technique she had developed. Her work demonstrated that ordinary human beings, through patient practice and sincere intention, could develop ongoing conscious relationship with deeper dimensions of their own being. This represented a profound democratization of spiritual wisdom that had previously been considered the exclusive domain of mystics, saints, and spiritual adepts. Perhaps most importantly, Helena's method offered a practical pathway for individuals to develop confidence in their own inner authority while maintaining appropriate humility and openness to continued learning. Rather than creating dependence on external teachers or systems of belief, her approach empowered people to discover and trust their own capacity for accessing wisdom and guidance when it was genuinely needed. The ripple effects of Helena's work continued to spread throughout Europe and eventually around the world. Students who had learned her method carried it with them as they traveled and settled in new locations, quietly sharing the technique with others who were ready to receive it. While Helena herself remained relatively unknown to history, preferring to let her method speak for itself rather than seeking personal recognition, her contribution to human understanding of consciousness and spiritual development proved to be both profound and enduring. For those drawn to explore their own capacity for soul communication, Helena's example offers both inspiration and practical guidance. Her approach emphasizes that such abilities are not supernatural gifts granted to a few special individuals, but rather natural human potentials that can be developed through sincere practice, ethical intention, and patient commitment to inner growth. The gentle wisdom of her grandmother's journal, with its emphasis on night conversations and soul whispers, reminds us that the answers we seek may already exist within us, waiting patiently for us to create the inner stillness necessary to hear them. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, you might consider following Helena's example by approaching your dreams and inner experience with greater reverence and attention, not necessarily expecting dramatic revelations, but simply remaining open to whatever guidance your own soul might offer to support your journey of growth and service. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.